Some conversations will be mind-blowing and you'll sit there and you'll have the most profound change.
I'll get distracted.
In progress. Well, I was born distracted, and I've lived that way for most of my life. I'm still not sure if I'm alive or not because I'm too distracted to tell. But it's one of
I love
those
it.
things.
I think this is a great way to start our conversation, actually, isn't it? What?
Yes. How do we know that we're alive if we're distracted?
Absolutely. How would we know? How would we know?
Well, see, but here's where we get to the central premise. If you're distracted, then you're alive.
Okay.
Because once you're no longer alive, then you'll never be distracted.
And how do you know that?
Well, having been dead for many years before I was alive, and I don't remember any of it, but I have to assume that's because I wasn't distracted.
Okay, cool. I think that's a great way to start our conversation. So first of all, I want to thank you for having this chat. It's been a long time coming, actually. We've kind of been orbiting each other in different ways.
Yes. Well, I've often been told that I'm large enough to have my own gravitational pull. So
that's what's been happening then. So
that's correct.
For the sake of people who are going to maybe listen to this and don't know who you are, who are you?
Yeah. Wait a minute, you're asking me?
Yeah.
See, because I think other people are better able to describe myself than I am because I don't live outside of myself, and therefore I only have like the inside view of who I am. But my name is Mike.
What's the inside view?
Yeah. So the inside view is I'm this guy, but the outside view is that I focus on human factors. So psychology, neuroscience, cognitive appreciation of how we do what we do. And I do, some things like hypnosis and NLP. And I'm a researcher in those fields and a teacher. And then occasionally I help people sort through issues or to become better performers at the things that they do. Sometimes that kind of stuff is called coaching. I never actually get to wear a coach's uniform or go out onto the field. So I don't know if I can call myself that because I feel like I'm being cheated. So, but other than that, if you're a coach, it stands to reason that you should be able to go out onto sports fields and yell at people. I never get to do this. So, I feel like I missed something somewhere and I'm due some yelling time on a field somewhere.
It's all about the coaching context, isn't it? It is interesting though how many people, if you say the word coach, they say, "Oh, what sport is it?" And you're like,
"Well, what's interesting is that when you think about what coaching is helping somebody to be good at whatever it is that they do. And sometimes people think that this is about expertise, which is really what fascinates me. Because, like, for example, I've worked with a lot of classical musicians, usually pianists. Pianists are quite big on how quickly they can play something and how accurately they can play something. And they're even worried about like what kind of finger span they have on a keyboard, because that'll say how well they can play what pieces. And they often come to me for help in terms of going into the right states to play quickly and accurately, and maybe even compensate for the fact that their fingers aren't as far apart as they would have preferred that God made them.
Why didn't he give me a spread?
Exactly. Can you hypnotize my fingers into being longer? No, but I can hypnotize them into being faster. How about that? Yeah. But the interesting thing there is that when I work with people like this, it's funny because I don't know how to play any musical instruments. My ability with music is limited to pressing play
and listening.
and so it's not about being an expert in how to do any particular thing. It's about being an expert in how people do certain things well and helping them to be the right person as they are performing the task so that they can do it optimally and perhaps even better than they're used to doing it. And that is kind of, again, it's a strange thing to describe because it doesn't happen that often where you describe your job that way, but
Yeah.
that's what I do. So it's unusual, but it's fun and I enjoy it. And I get to experience lots of things in lots of different ways that I wouldn't otherwise. So
That's cool. You've sent my mind down a rabbit hole already, though.
wow.
Why specifically, or lots of pianists? Just because you've worked with some and been good at it, and
Well, yeah, I mean, that's basically it. Is I had one pianist sort of wander in randomly. It's kind of the way ants work, because
Okay.
all ants wander around randomly until one hits food, and that ant left a trail, and then the other ants follow that trail, and then pretty soon the food is covered with ants.
Yeah.
So I got covered with pianists. I don't know why.
Ants playing pianos. I love it.
Exactly. Pianist ants.
Cool. So how did you get into this whole fascination of brains, what we do, what we don't do, and all of this human stuff? Where did that come from?
Well, first of all, I was born with a brain,
Yeah.
which was a defect at my birth, and ever since then, I've been trying to compensate for it. But the really the honest answer is that by accident. I was working in IT, in information technology,
Mhm.
and I was playing around with computers, and I happen to be able to do two things well that don't necessarily go together that often in the IT industry.
Okay.
So the first thing I was able to do is I was able to fix complicated machines and
Right.
figure out logic puzzles and things like that. But the second thing that I was able to do was I was able to explain this simply to average people. And that's a lot less common. And so one time when I was, working in a company where a lot of the IT department, nobody wanted to call them because they would usually wind up very angry and upset after the call. And the IT guys would get angry and upset too, because they'd say, "You idiot! Why did anyone let you touch a computer?
Yeah.
You're
Why
obviously
don't you understand?
exactly. You're a walking disaster. No one should allow you to touch computers." And so with this, they had a 75% approval rating, 75% against, and and so they went to me and they said, "Michael, you can do both of these things. We've hired communications trainers to come in and try to teach them how to do this. And none of them have succeeded. So we have decided that this is now your job."
Okay.
And I told them, I said, "Look, I'm happy to do it, but we have a problem. I don't know how I communicate. I do communicate, but I don't know how I communicate. And I certainly don't know how to teach that to anybody else. So you're going to have to pay me to go and learn how to communicate and then learn how to teach it."
Cool.
And they said, "Okay, but keep in mind, you've got 6 months, and if it doesn't work, you're fired."
Okay.
And I said, "Well, there's an incentive for you,
Yeah.
But luckily, expense account. So so I went off and the first thing that I did was I just went and looked for something that was about communications. But I also had to look simultaneously at something that was about how to teach people quickly and effectively and how to create behavioral change. And I happened to stumble across a thing called a neuro-linguistic programming. And it's not about programming or deprogramming anything really, but they use a computer metaphor quite a lot. And since this was about teaching IT people things, the computer metaphor was the right metaphor for teaching.
It was singing to you.
Exactly. I'm like, yes, this is something they will understand. This is something I will understand. And it not only promised to explain how people think, but how people communicate. And also how to teach them more rapidly and effectively their learning styles and that sort of thing. And so I said, okay, so this hits several bullseyes with one arrow.
Yeah.
So I'll take that. And then I went and I learned that. And then basically when I started teaching communications to these guys, and first off, everything went much better. They suddenly were much better communicators.
Yeah.
But also they started coming back to me and sort of telling me stories about how their lives had changed because their communication abilities had improved. And suddenly, guys who had never talked to a girl were suddenly talking to girls in a way that was not, like having them wind up in court.
Yeah.
And, and other people were suddenly, resolving home issues and things like that just by these new communications tools. And I started to realize that this stuff was actually capable of changing lives.
Yeah.
And that's when I got fascinated with the other side of it, which originally was not my interest at all.
No, it got
But once I saw what was possible, then I went, "Ooh, this is interesting." And I started becoming more and more interested in that facet of things. And so luckily, again, I just went everywhere. I studied from everyone. And then I put it together. I sort of, homogenated and amalgamated my own understanding of it. And then I spent years, researching and doing some modeling of some exemplars of excellence, just understanding how they did what they did. And then I started to create new stuff for myself. Like I created a thing that called the Neuron Code, which is a very neurologically informed approach to hypnotically influential language.
Cool.
So
Tell us
that
a
you can
little
help.
bit more about that. Tell us a little bit more about that.
See, that's interesting because basically, this is, I'm going to start with something that's a little bit weird, but I'm a little bit weird and you're a little bit weird.
We
and I
like
hope
weird.
Exactly.
We like weird.
It'll work out. So if you go back about 3.5 million years to about the time that we came down from the trees and we started walking around the plains of the Serengeti or, the plains of Ethiopia, wherever it might have been.
Yeah.
One of the things that was really interesting about us is that we didn't have language at the time. In fact, one of the most interesting things about human beings is that you can use the fossil record to track the time when language became super important. And that's probably when it became sophisticated. And the way that you can do that is because of the roof of the top of your mouth.
Okay.
Because you've got this weird shape up there, right? It goes down.
I'm going to go up there now. I've set my tongue right up there because you brought me
exactly. So everybody can feel how weird the top of your mouth is.
Yeah.
But the reason that the top of your mouth is so weird is because depending on where you put the tip of your tongue while you are breathing out and enunciating, you can make P's, you can make H's, you can make N's, and it's all about where your mouth is relative to the top of your mouth. So the top of your mouth, in a way, is a musical instrument. Now, if you go back more than about 50,000 years, it's flat.
Okay.
It is just flat and featureless. But at some point, it became a survival characteristic that the people who had these weird, deformed tops of their mouths became more survivable.
Okay.
And that basically comes down to the fact that the more distinct consonant and vowel sounds that you can make, the more words you can say. The more words you can say, the better you can talk. The better you can talk, the more likely you are to survive. Isn't that interesting? I mean, to me,
I was like, I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah. And so, but what this means is now, see, here's the other thing about human beings. And I want you to think about this because it's interesting. At least to me, it is. We don't have so many of the things that make us survivable in nature that other animals have.
Okay.
We don't have massive strength. In fact, a chimpanzee has the strength of several men. I mean, a chimpanzee will rip a human being apart without even thinking twice about
it.
Yeah. We don't have armor. We're not like a rhino or a hippo or something. We don't have weapons. We don't have claws. We don't have sharp incisors, long incisors. We don't have the ability to run super quickly. I mean, as fast as Usain Bolt or anybody else can run, a cheetah will lap them,
Yeah.
And so the way that we have survived well, I mean, we have a few interesting things. We have this swollen forebrain. Instead of having this nice, smooth back road, we now have this dome, and this dome contains a brain that is weirdly deformed because it's got the front is all crazy swollen, and that lets us think about things in certain ways. We have these opposable thumbs. These allow us to be tool users. So basically, if we didn't have these, we'd have a much harder time. But also, we have cooperation. Now, what's really interesting is that if you look at, let's say, for example, I don't know, most animals, when they go hunting, they're looking for the weakest animal. And, so that way the whole herd runs away. But one animal's weak, it's sick, it's old, it's young, whatever it is. And then they cut that animal out, and then they beat it up and they kill it and they eat it.
Yeah.
Well, human beings, we have a certain kind of hunting style that goes all the way back, hundreds of thousands of years. In fact, millions of years probably. That's called persistence hunting.
Okay.
Now, first off, it requires a group of human beings. But secondly, it requires quite a lot of sophisticated communications, because what will happen is that they'll isolate the biggest animal, the healthiest animal. The reason that they're looking for the biggest and the healthiest animal is that if you get a really big kudu or a really big water buffalo or something like that,
yeah,
and you start running after it, that animal is the strongest animal, but it also has the least endurance because it's got the most weight to carry around.
yeah.
Now, meanwhile, we human beings, instead of running around on 4 legs, we run around on 2 legs. That makes us more energy efficient for running. We also have opposable thumbs and a swollen forebrain, so we can do things like take a container and fill it full of a liquid so that we can carry water with us, which these animals can't do. We also have the ability to perspire frequently, and that's something that animals can't do nearly as well as we do.
Mm.
And so the end result is, out in the hot desert sun, we'd go chasing the animal and the animal would run. And this might go on for 6 hours. But eventually this team of people coordinating their behaviors would run down the animal, and the animal would fall down. And then once it has fallen down, then anybody can kill it. It doesn't matter that we don't have shark fangs or armor or anything else.
They wore it down.
Yeah, exactly. All we're doing was putting the animal out of its misery at that point. But here's the other thing about us. We have terrible stomachs. We're not like vultures where we can eat rotten food and we don't care. So we have to eat the healthiest, happiest animal, because otherwise we're going to get sick. Now, all of that requires that essentially, first off, human beings have to go into tribes. And they have to cooperate, and they have to give each other sophisticated information. And that meant that we had to be able to communicate in very sophisticated ways.
Right.
This is one of the reasons why we were able to adapt to just about anywhere in the world. I mean, if you think about it, if a bear wants to go to the Arctic, well, that can take hundreds of thousands of years for that bear to develop more blubber and then a thicker coat, and then eventually you have a polar bear, right?
Yeah.
Now, on the other hand, a human tribe can go to the Arctic, and the old man kills a polar bear, tans the hide, and makes a coat. And now he can live in the Arctic.
Yeah.
And the little kid, watching what his dad did, can reproduce it. So in one generation, you have humans adapted for the Arctic. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, once you start to think about that, this means that we have all of this really sophisticated stuff, but language, really sophisticated language, probably, I mean, written language only appears maybe 4,000 years ago. There's significant evidence that maybe 10,000 years ago is when really sophisticated spoken language, the way we think about it, developed. 50,000 years ago is as far as you can go back and even have that be a biological feasible thing. So my question is, if we've been around for 3.5 million years, and if we've been relying on sophisticated communications, and yet this kind of sophisticated speech is very recent, then how were we communicating with one another in these really sophisticated ways so that we could develop these survival characteristics? And one of the things that I would suggest, and again, this is just one way of thinking of it. I don't know that it's true, but I think it might make sense.
Mm-hmm. Come on.
If people have been, have these sophisticated communication methodologies that didn't involve digital language and the words they were saying to convey meaning,
Mm-hmm.
then we must have had some other means of doing so. And if we had some other means of doing so, but then eventually came to rely on this methodology, it would mean that those other means are still there,
Yeah.
but they're outside of conscious appraisal, because consciousness really loves language, because this part of the brain, the neocortex, is where you have the Broca's and the Warnke area and all the stuff for language processing. And therefore, the rest of your brain doesn't do language, but this little part up front does.
Yeah.
But it means that we have means of communications outside of language that are processed further back in the brain. And when you do stuff further back in the brain, it tends to be more powerfully effective and more influential, because we are able to do things in other parts of our brain that we don't know how to consciously make ourselves do or tell one another to do.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you just one quick example. So they took some folks on a college campus, because of course the slave labor of science are grad students.
Yeah.
So they took some grad students, and what they did is that they had some of the grad students worked out. So they took a nice shower, they had a workout, and they wore a t-shirt. So the t-shirt had perspiration, but it wasn't stinky perspiration, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they gave these t-shirts to the students to sniff. And then what they did was, out of the view of the students, of course, they drew a pattern with the t-shirt. They dragged it through, the grass on the greens of the campus. And then what they did is that they asked the students to try to sniff the grass and follow the route by, that they'd taken to drag the t-shirt around. Well, this didn't work. But on the other hand, if you take a jog and you do the same thing, the dogs could follow the trail pretty well.
Absolutely.
But here's the other thing that they did. They took another group of students. They had them sniff the t-shirt, brought them to the place. They brought them to the place where the trail started. And they said, okay, here's what we would like for you to do. We would like for you, and I think they maybe even blindfolded them. I don't remember for sure, but they just told them, smell the grass and go in the way that seems right. Just go whichever way you feel like going as you're sniffing the grass.
Yeah.
Now, it turned out that suddenly about half of them could follow the scent trail pretty close.
That's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. So that suggests we have the equipment. Now, our nose is not as good as a dog's nose, but we have the equipment to sense this stuff. But that information no longer reaches the front of our prefrontal cortex so that it comes up as conscious information. So the only way you can get it is pre-consciously. It's like an instinct. But most of us aren't listening to our instincts.
No.
Most of us are just busy living our analytical life. And if you can somehow go further back into the brain, you've got access to all kinds of stuff that you don't know you have access to. See, I'll give you an example. Most people have a fully functional time clock. And what I mean to say is that, and again, you can, folks at home, you can try this if you'd like. What you do is right just before you go to bed, say, tomorrow morning, I will wake up at 8 a.m. And I'll be damned if most of the time you don't wind up getting up about 7:57, looking at the clock and saying, yeah, it's just about 8.
Yeah.
Janice, have you ever done this one?
I do this one all the time. Not never.
Yeah.
Never had to
No.
use an alarm or anything in so long, even if I've got to get up really early to go to the airport or something. It's just like, yeah, you need to be up at this time. So I'm going to guarantee, because I'm the way I am, I'm going to be at least probably 45 minutes ahead of the time that I really need to be up.
Yeah, but the point is that your brain keeps a time clock. Now, do you have conscious access to that time clock? No, at least I don't. I mean, maybe
No.
some of our listeners might.
No.
But most of us do not have conscious access to it, but it doesn't mean it's not there.
Absolutely.
We all have it. And if you figure out a way to rely on it, you can use it, but it has to take place outside of consciousness, because you're not going to see a little heads up display with a digital readout to tell you what time it is.
So it's that understanding how to access it?
Yes. And that's it. And so therefore, see, I describe hypnosis as any kind of communication that helps people to go into an altered state of consciousness.
Yeah.
And one of the great things about altered states of consciousness is that some of them give us access to information that we don't normally have access to. And so, like, for example, in my own case, I developed a thing called osteoarthritis of the spine. What that meant is that my spine is a little bit spongy and it kind of crumbles and it gets a little bit jagged and it tears at the nerves coming out of my spinal cord.
Mm.
And this left me bedridden and suffering from pretty constant chronic pain. Well, one of the things that I had to do is that again, I'm a little bit slow. It took me about 3 years to deal with the pain and then start, walking around again.
Yeah.
And I was moving around at turtle-like velocities. I wasn't exactly setting any speed records, but eventually I did get back up.
Yeah.
Now, when that happened, and as that happened, it was something that I had to learn to, to deal with. And I had to learn, what state of consciousness can I be in where my body doesn't hurt?
Yeah.
And once I'm in that state of consciousness, how can I make sure that I'm adding an awareness of my surroundings to that state of consciousness, so I'm not just strung out in bed, tripped out on goofballs? And then to that, what do I need to do to add motion to that? How do I relearn to use my body in a way that I couldn't use the old way that I knew, but I could come up with some new things?
New way of doing it.
Exactly. And therefore, and I just assumed there must be some way. And if there is, I'm just gonna find it. But I had to rely on unconscious wisdom, because in terms of my analytical analysis of my own state, I know a lot, but I don't know a lot of stuff that is coming in through my various sensory cortices, my motor cortex, my cerebral cortex. That gets a lot of information about my body that doesn't come up to analysis, doesn't come up to the front of my brain. And therefore, I had to ask myself, brain, me, at a deeper level, based on what I know about me that I don't know that I know about me, what can I do to move again, freely and easily and without pain? And so, again, wasn't an instant process, certainly wasn't waving a wand. A lot of people think hypnosis is all about waving a wand and presto chango, poof.
No. We wish.
It would be nice, but no, it was a process and I had to learn. And again, a lot of us, we understand more about a thing called meditation than we do about hypnosis, but they're kind of twin brothers.
I was going to say they're pretty related, right?
They're very strongly related, and therefore, because meditation is a lot about going into an altered state of consciousness in order to get access to certain ways of thinking and being that we don't normally get.
Mm.
And so, I had to practice it like a discipline.
It's interesting. For years and years and years, I had really bad endometriosis and hypnosis, altered state. That was the way to manage my pain on a daily basis, until finally I thought, you know what, this thing's really rotten. I should just get it cut out and suck it up and deal with it. But the pain management side of it purely came from going into an altered state. And I used to go in and I just used to imagine, because it was all right center was rotten and left was great. I would go, well, what's the left look like? What does it feel like? And I would do that. And I'd managed it really well. But then came the point that it changed. And then after the point of change, having surgery and actually nearly dying because of that, blah, blah, blah. It was hypnosis, meditation, whatever you want to call it, that brought me back into, okay, now I'll relearn a new way of being post this thing.
Yes.
It's
and then that
right?
ended your metriosis. So
Yeah.
and it was the end of your metriosis. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It was. Finally.
Because the big endometriosis is always the worst part. The middle metriosis is okay, but the endometriosis is really everyone's waiting for.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, people maybe listening to this that, aren't, I have a lot of listeners and friends that will listen to this that don't necessarily go down the rabbit holes like we do.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, so if they were listening and they were thinking that, you've dropped a thought bomb into their mind about some pain or something that they're having, what could be an easy way for them to start to have a little play at changing?
Can I just let me give you a thought exercise just to play around with? All right. So this is not serious hypnosis. This is just fun.
Yeah.
One thing that you can do is, let's imagine that you had like a scanner. Remember, like the old copying machines that go, like that.
Yeah.
And they'd scan up and down. Well, imagine that you had a scanner that went all the way from the top of your head and scanned all the way down to the bottom of your feet. Now, if you did that, then you could scan for different things. Like, for example, right now, I'm going to look in my body, and this is just going to be for a moment, okay? Right now, I want to feel for the place that I feel least comfortable right now. Now, if I scan down, starting from the top of my head, it's not hard. I get right about to my butt. And my butt doesn't feel that comfortable because I'm sitting on it.
Right.
So that is the place in my body that I feel least comfortable right now. Okay. Yeah. Now, let's imagine I close my eyes and I imagine that let's imagine that I have a center of attention, right? The main thing that I'm paying attention to, my point of focus. And I imagine that this point of focus goes all the way down into my butt. Now, by doing that, just by shifting my attention to my butt, I actually feel worse than I did about a minute before we started talking about this.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's take a moment, move your body around, just fidget, fiddle. Let's reset the counter. Okay. Because I don't want anybody to feel uncomfortable for very long. There's no reason for it. Now, here's what I'm going to do next. Now we're going to have a little bit more of a pleasant scan. I just want you to find the one place on your body as you scan down that is the most comfortable. Where do you feel nicest in your body? And I'm scanning down, just scan down. All the way down. And I've got a few nice little places. I've got a lovely thing right between my shoulder blades that feels really comfortable right now. Kind of nuzzling my back in my chair.
Like that.
Okay. Now, if I close my eyes and if I imagine that, again, I have a center of focus, I have a point of focus, and I'm going to put it there in the most comfortable place. I might even imagine that good feeling spreading out from that place. Can you imagine? What if good feeling was like the rays of the sun? You could just radiate out and warm you up and make you feel comfortable and good. Now, opening your eyes for a moment. See, just by changing your focus, you can change the felt sense of your body, right? Yeah. If you contrast and compare to what it felt like when you're feeling that uncomfortable spot and how much more comfortable you feel right now, I didn't give you any pills. I didn't do anything other than that. Now, if you learn to do this kind of thing, and you can have someone do it with you because it helps at first, and then you can learn to do it for yourself. These are things that can actually start to make real changes in the way that you feel about the world. Let me give you one other thing, which isn't about pain, but it's about some other kind of pain, but it's along the same lines, right? I want you to think about, just for a moment, nothing traumatic, but just think about something that's really uncomfortable in your life right now, a life situation that you don't like. And if you think about it, and if you think about it too long, and I'm not going to have you think about it for very long, but just for a moment, it makes you feel uncomfortable, right? And the problem is when you have to deal with a tough life situation, the more good feeling and health and happiness you can bring into that situation, the better off you are to deal with it effectively.
Yeah.
How many of us have put off dealing with a situation because we didn't like even thinking about it because it wasn't nice?
Yeah.
That's me for sure.
Yeah.
So therefore, one of the other things you can do is that I'm going to take a moment. Again, let's move our bodies around just for a moment, reset everything.
Yeah.
And it's funny because we feel things with our body, right? You get a sinking feeling in your gut. You have a rising sensation in your chest. You might have butterflies in your stomach. So that's the reason I tell you to move your body around. Now, if you then think about something that you're really happy about, something that's going well, one thing in your life that, and it might be more than one thing, but let's just focus on one thing for right now. One thing in your life that when you close your eyes, when you think about it, that is just, so glad that that's true. I'm so glad that that's happening. I'm so glad that that person that I love, that place that I love, that thing, that activity that I do, whatever it is, that truth about the world, I'm so glad it's true. I'm so glad that's there. I'm so glad this persists. And if you take a moment now and look at the other situations in your life through the lens of this feeling, even the stuff, and again, you tell me whether I'm lying or not, but even the stuff that's kind of unpleasant to deal with seems a little bit more manageable, seems a little bit more possible when you look at it through the lens of what's true, that's good, that's all right, that's, someone who cares about you, something you care about, something you love, something that makes the world better just because it's there.
Absolutely. I've got to share this with you for anyone
Please.
that's listening. So my daughter recently had her first baby. So I became a grandmother.
Yeah, I saw the pictures.
Or an Omi, should I say. And she's called Callie. And she is my calibration tool. And she literally makes me shine. If I'm like going like that, I'm like, I've got the Callie going on. And so I haven't told them this, but basically she is now my calibration tool. She's like, yeah, feeling a bit naff, feeling a bit, oh God, exactly as you said, picking this off. And now I just go straight into Callie mode and I'm like, yeah, everything is good. Everything is good. And it's that simple for us though.
And even what isn't good is manageable. We'll figure it out.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really important thing that you're saying there, for anyone that was listening to that and enjoying that, we'll make sure they get your details at the end of this as well.
Sure.
But it's just it's real simple stuff, isn't it? A lot of it. It doesn't have to be so complicated. And I think that's over the years of doing what I'm doing and watching things, I'm like, man, some of these people out there, they just make it so complicated. It doesn't need to be.
And I look, and there's some edge cases where something complicated is needed. And I understand that, and that's why I know how to do things. But most of it is really about, and this is the other thing about human beings. We as primates are animals that are designed to live in groups. And almost all of our psychology is a kind of sociology.
Yeah.
It's the stuff around us, the people around us that affect who and what we are. And so one of the things that as a coach, because I don't like to call myself a coach that much because I don't like the phrase that much because again, I think I should be wearing a baseball mitt or something.
Yeah.
But the word that I do like, even though not too many people use it, is the word facilitator.
Yeah.
And that comes from the French word facile. Facile just means easy.
Okay.
And by my being around, I make it easier to do something that would be hard if you were trying to do it entirely on your own. Now, again, I'm much more about teaching people to fish than fishing on their behalf.
Yeah.
And this does require, an ongoing interaction, but eventually this is about you doing it by yourself because, I don't want to be here forever. standing around nudging you. But
No.
I'm happy to do it for a little while because it helps you to get started. There's people that I've worked with over the years. I might work with them for 6 weeks, and then sometimes, if they're doing some kind of really big, just fundamental change work in their lives, or starting a new business or something like that, I might work with them for a year. And then I might not see them for 2 or 3 years. And then something comes up and then they say, Michael, can we do a little bit of work?
Yeah.
Because I've got this thing or I've got that thing. And then, yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
So,
I love
fun.
that analogy of the facilitator. So it's made me think about one of my friends in Antigua, Nikki, and some work that we did together. She's effectively a HR person, but she's not
Right.
really like HR as we know it, because she's more
Right.
she's more on our side. So she calls herself the HR rule breaker. Oh, that's one of her things. And we came up with these things and we called ourselves Sherpas. We were just there to guide. We were just there to guide. And if we think about that, we all need somebody at some point in our lives to facilitate, to guide, to help us navigate, right? There's nothing wrong with that.
Because one of the things that's also true about human beings, because we were talking about how did we communicate before we had really sophisticated language. And a lot of that has to do with the thing that human beings do naturally, which is what I refer to as state contagion.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means is that if Janice is in a certain state of mind and I start hanging around with Janice, I'm going to start experiencing some aspect of her state of mind. Because one of the ways that we naturally try to understand one another is we try to kind of unconsciously step into their shoes. We try on their feelings to understand what they must be feeling like so that we can have compassion and empathy and all of the things that we do. And that means that sometimes when we're not at our best, feeling how others are at their best helps us to reach our best as well.
Yeah.
And so some of the stuff that we do, Janice, you and I, is we are professionals at going into states that help other people go into their corresponding states that helps them to do stuff. And that's harder or even sometimes impossible to do when you're just on your own.
Yeah.
And that's why sometimes you need just somebody around just to be the person who's in the right state so that you can synchronize with that. And then once you're there, then you're good.
Yeah.
I don't need to hang around forever. Janice doesn't, she's got other things to do.
Absolutely.
She's got a Cali to break with.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a Cali to break with. I like that.
That's right.
It's so interesting. We're in this conversation and I'm feeling like it could go on for hours and hours and hours. And
yes, and it will.
Yes. It's just making me think we'll have to do another one at some point.
Oh, yeah. Please do. I'd love it. Because for example, we haven't even talked about the fact that both of us enjoy tropical islands.
Absolutely. We definitely do that. I'm supposed to be heading back to my tropical island, but the calibration is making it hard.
Yeah, she deserves to go and look at the sea too.
Absolutely, that's what I've been saying to them. I said, you need to come soon, but yeah. So
I think it's time to broaden her horizons, don't you think?
Absolutely. Now that we're starting to calm down, this whole world that we've all been navigating, I'm not even going to go into that and all the things that have happened.
For sure.
And I guess actually the only thing that I do know is that for people like us who are a bit weird and are into some of the things that we're into, I think we've probably had a huge benefit to navigate this world in the last ways that it's been going. For sure.
That is for sure. This is one of the reasons why during this time when I've had a number of people reach out to me because of, the circumstances and everything going on. One of the first things that I did was I said, look, through accidents and incidents of life and, I kind of stumbled into this stuff without ever planning to do so. And I really started to think to myself, how fortunate I was to have the set of circumstances that just wound up putting me in this situation. And so I think that for those of us who do this kind of stuff and who are interested in this kind of stuff, we have a duty to kick some of it back. And because not only is it a duty, but it's a self benefit. And what I mean by that is it's a very selfish act to help others sometimes, because when we make others around us feel better about their lives and about what's going on in their lives, that in turn reflects back to us.
Absolutely.
The rising tide lifts all boats. So, look, there's more than enough unhappiness in the world. A lot of it is being engineered right now to make sure that everybody's miserable and everybody's fighting. And you must be my enemy because you don't agree with me about this, this idea or that idea. But here's the truth. All of us are responsible to each and every one of us. And in the way that we can help most, which is not to argue about some factoid or which politician you like or don't like. It really comes down to, are you okay? And let's hang around together and let's find some reason to think about something that makes us smile and makes us happy so that we have more strength to carry on and to do the things we need to do to make sure that everybody's taken care of and that we get through this situation in the best way we can, even if we disagree on what that is. But just by being in the right state to be positive and not positive to the extent that we're trying to negatively hallucinate everything that's going wrong. Oh, well, that's not real. I don't believe in it. Well, no. Believe in it and then do something about it. Do what you can do. Help who you can. Be a good human being.
Yeah.
And in return, you'll get that back. Not from everybody.
No.
But from enough people, from the right people. Those who matter don't mind. Those who mind don't matter. The right people will always feed back to you. The right people will always come back to you. For the rest of them, don't be the person they deserve. Be the person that you are. Let that originate from who you are and who you are becoming. Be the person that you want to be. Because in the end, you got to wake up with you every day of your life.
Absolutely.
So make sure that you're waking up with somebody you like.
Absolutely. That was fantastic. I love that. I was like, man, I'm going to make him stop there. And this is going to be the end of our conversation. And that's simply because that was so good. I love that. But as soon as we're off this, I'm going to go back and listen to that because I really like that. So,
well, I'm so happy to talk with you, and I look forward to the next time.
I know we're gonna do this again. So what you can do if you want to is you can tell the people that are listening how they can find you, and then we'll put a bunch of links anyway. But just thank you so much.
Well, first off, it's my pleasure. And secondly, Janice, again, we need to have other and more conversations,
Absolutely.
sometime soon. And some of those can be recorded and some of those don't have to be.
Absolutely. I agree with that too.
And for those of you, if you need a little help and, look, if you just need somebody to talk to for a while and, I'm happy to do what I can for you. My website is Michael Perez Hypnosis, all one word, michaelperezhypnosis.com. You can book in a session. You can book in a free session, and just that just means we're going to have a little conversation on Zoom or Skype or whatever the kids use these days. And I'll be glad to talk with you and see where you're at. If you need some professional facilitation, I can do that for you. For some professional coaching, if you prefer that word, I can do that for you. And if you just need to check in with somebody and see how things are going, I can do that for you too. So happy to help any way that I can. If for some reason you also want to learn how to do what I do, happy to teach you that as well. Right now, we don't have anything scheduled because of the circumstances, but I'm looking forward to actually going out and running classes again. Maybe in a year or so. I hope so.
Yeah, that would be cool. Thank you ever so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
A joy.
Thank you. Have a great rest of the day.
Be well.
You too. Bye-bye.